In 1983, this screen grab was flashed across our television sets on NBC. To the heroism of the resistance fighters, past, present, and future, this work is respectfully dedicated. Dare I say what we're doing today? Hopefully we'll honor this wonderful beginning to an incredible story that started back in 1983. Ladies and gentlemen, you know who I am. I'm Roger. That's Marsha, my co-host. Marsha, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm fantastic.
So am I. And we are privileged, folks, to have Kenny Johnson. I think I may have gotten all three in there. And Ken Johnson on with us. Mr. Johnson. That'll be the last Mr. Johnson.
Please.
How are you this morning? How is everything with you?
Oh, I'm terrific. I'm so happy to be here with you. It's always wonderful to be able to be face to face with fans, or at least online and linked up to them, and be able to hear their thoughts and ideas. It's so much fun when I've been down to Comic-Con a couple of times. First time I went was for the release of the Incredible Hulk DVD set, and Universal said, "Hey, would you go down and do a little Q&A?" And I thought, sure. I figured it'd be me and a couple hundred people, maybe, and they take me into this airplane hangar, and there's like 4,000 people standing on their chairs. I'm going, oh, okay. But it's actually there's hardly anything more wonderful in the world than walking into an airplane hangar with 4,000 people in it who love your stuff, and are there because it's stuff that you've written has touched them in one way or another. And so it's great always to be in direct contact with all the people who have done me the honor of tuning into to my materials.
Kenny, it's so kind of you again, and thank you for that. I do want to remind everyone in the chat room, why don't you let us know who you are, where you hail from. Start off with some questions. We're going to get to them. Sonia Casado already has a question loaded up, so we're going to get to it in just a few moments. But as you know, just very quickly, and I know he's going to correct me, but Kenny has so many credits in Hollywood, from, of course, the miniseries, to The Incredible Hulk, to Alienation. And that's probably 3 of 100. So I know Marsha knows more than I do because I'm nervous right now. It's very rare when I'm nervous with a guest. So I do apologize, folks. It's not about me. Please, in the chat room, let us know who you are so we can get to it. But Kenny, in 1983, wow, the miniseries debuted. And boy, did it help number 3 NBC move up. It made them. What an experience, Ken. And I know you've had so many years to look back on it, and I'm sure you've been asked this question over and over, but did you get any ancillaries from NBC? Because it went from 3 to number 1?
No, but we got a lot of love, that's for sure. There's no question about that. And when Brandon, I was having dinner with Brandon Tartikoff, who was then the young new president at NBC. He had been working with Freddie Silverman before that at ABC, and so he and I were friends. And he asked me what I was working on at the time. And at the time, I was writing a screenplay. I had read Sinclair Lewis's novel, great American novelist. Sinclair Lewis in 1935 wrote a book called It Can't Happen Here, which was about the rise of fascism that was going on in Germany and Italy at the time, with the idea of, well, it can't happen here in America. Well, maybe it has in just a couple of weeks ago. We'll see where it's going. But Brandon thought it was a great idea, wanted to read the script, and he did. And he loved it, and he said, "I want to do it as a miniseries." I said, "No, Brandon, this is a feature. It's not television, and yeah, not TV, And but he really loved it so much. I said, "Okay, well, let's come talk about it." And he really loved the idea of America being under occupation, which was part of the story. But he didn't think that Americans might really understand what fascism was. And I said, well, it's not that complicated a concept. You put on a black shirt, you shave your head, and you beat somebody up, and or more subtly than that, as we have seen recently here in the U.S. But so he said, how couldn't it be the Soviets in those days, or the Chinese? And I said, I don't believe they could sustain an occupation of the United States. And his young vice president, Jeff Sagansky, who would go on later to be the president of CBS and TriStar Pictures and Sony and lots of stuff. But Jeff, at the point that time, was the kid in the corner, said, "How about aliens, Kenny?" And I went, "Wah!" because I had, having done the Bionic Woman and the $6 Million Man and then the Incredible Hulk, the pigeonhole that Hollywood thinks about you in begins to shrink and get smaller and smaller. And so I didn't want to really do any more sci-fi, but I went home that night. First of all, in the office, I said, "Brandon, no, I don't want to go that way." And they said, "Well, just think about it, And I went home that night and I was thinking about it, and I thought, that's really a brilliant idea that Jeff had, because I can tell the story that I want to tell, which was about power and about how everyday people react to power, But I could still tell my same story, but I'd have all the eye candy of little spaceships and stuff flying around, And this was made by a fan for me, and so I would be able to get to a larger audience, but yet still tell the same story that I wanted to tell. So once I came back and pitched that approach, they all said yes, and they said, "Go do it quickly, because we're in the toilet with our ratings." And you were right, what you said, Roger. Brandon really needed a couple of big flashy things to go on the air that would draw an audience into NBC, and it did, certainly. We had a 40 share, the number one show in the country. A 40 share makes us, to this day, the highest rated work of science fiction in the history of television. A lot of shows like Star Trek and so many others went on and on and on, but the highest rated work of sci-fi was, and still is, V, and it really makes me proud.
That is a mic drop moment right there. A 40 share. Wow. That's
a 40 share. What that means to an audience, that 40% of the TV sets in North America, not just the US, but in North America, 40% of the TV sets that were on were tuned to NBC. And that equates to a viewership of about 80, 90 million people. And that was just in the US. In 1984, of course, it was released overseas, and we were up against the 1984 Olympics, okay? Well, we beat the Olympics 2-1 in the ratings around the world. And so it was really a rewarding experience to be able to get the story out there and have people get excited about the concept.
What an incredible program. JD from Long Island, New York is saying hi. Sonia does have a question we're going to get to in a bit, but Sonia, let us know where you are from, and everyone else. Let's do a roll call, folks. Let's know. Marcia, let's get it going. I'm going to get to some of the comments.
Sure, roll call. I'm originally from New York City, born and raised in New York City. And speaking about New York City, I remember the advertising campaign. I took the subway.
Yeah, that was it was interesting, because when I was doing The Incredible Hulk at CBS, the head of advertising and publicity was a guy named Steve Somer, and we were always banging heads because I had sold my soul to get Bill Bixby to be the lead for The Incredible Hulk, big television star. And when Steve took the first advertisement for the show coming up, it was a full page of Green Monster, Lou, and with a banner headline that said "Green Monster on the Loose." And down at the bottom, it said in little tiny letters, starring Bill Bixby. And of course, I had to peel Bix off the ceiling. And I went into Steve and I said, "You imbecile, we're going to get the kids. You have to let them know that this big star is there," which brings a level of, anyway, Steve and I banged heads for 5 years on The Incredible Hulk. Now I'm doing V. And Brandon called me one day and said, "Kenny, I'm very excited. We just hired a new guy to do advertising publicity for NBC." And I said, "Oh, okay." And he said, "His name is Steve Somer." And I went, "Oh my God. Here I go again." And so I decided to face the tiger, and I went to Steve's office and I said, "Hey, buddy, you don't like me because you think I try to meddle in what you do. I have problems a lot of times with what you do because I don't think that you caught the essence of it." I said, "But we're going to talk about V, but let me tell you, I have got an idea, Steve." I said, "How about this? for an advertising campaign 3 weeks before the show goes on the air. Put up propaganda posters. You've seen the Nazi propaganda posters with the Wehrmacht soldiers with their little Dutch girls sitting on their shoulders. Hi, we're the Nazis. We're here to new guys to be your friends. I said, put up posters like that, and don't mention the show. Don't mention NBC. Just propaganda posters for 3 weeks out. And then the second week, just send a bunch of kids out with spray cans and deface your own poster with a big red V, which is what the resistance used to do in Europe during World War II, to the Nazi posters. And I said, and then just on the last week, put a little thing in the corner that says the battle begins on NBC May 1st, right? And Steve came out of his chair. He said, "Oh my God, that's great!" And he said, at the same time, we'll do a countdown on the air. We'll do only 17 days until they arrive. So that was tied together. And Steve actually put his money where his mouth was. They spent millions of dollars to do that. And I had friends, Marcia, like you, in New York, who were calling me saying, have you seen these propaganda on the subways and the bus stations? And it was, I said, yeah, that's pretty cool. I wonder what that is. So that's where it came from.
We couldn't stop talking about it beforehand. Everybody, the buzz was just rising from the street, and so on May 1st, we were all gathered around the TV and were absolutely enthralled and
Wow.
stunned. You can see the picture behind me is actually of fans who in 1985 sewed their own V costumes.
Oh, there are legions of them.
Yes, and they are on stage at a costume contest at a Star Trek convention. And at a Star Trek convention, they actually won second prize because of their costumes. They have not the original, but they have the guns and I have to show you. This is
right.
A wallet that, remember the zip wallet,
Oh, sure.
with the Velcro. He took, my boyfriend took a wallet and made his own insignia, and he also made the key card.
Right. Oh, right.
And he also did a blaster permit for the blaster pistol.
That's so funny. Yeah,
that is funny.
The fandom is still amazing. This was 1995, but as you know, even today, there are so many motherships around the world that we get together and do.
Right. Oh, yeah. No, it's true, and it's my friend Martin Jarvis in the UK is the head of the operation over there, and has been a big helpmate throughout, keeping me in touch with all the different fan groups. And I think on my website there is a link to a parade in Madrid during Carnival in about 2018 or 19, where there's like 75 of them marching in the street with these floats. They have one of our spacecraft actually as a Rose Parade float going down the street behind them, and they're all marching, and it's amazing. So you can see it happening around the world, and it still goes on today, and it's just it's amazing. I'm so proud of it, and glad that it stirs people up.
Oh, it definitely does. Jerry Seward is from Saginaw, Michigan. Thank you. Joining us, Patrice is here from Montreal and already has a question.
Okay,
first. I was 3 years old when I saw V for the first time.
Ooh.
I was traumatized by the alien face when Mike rips the human face. I'm a huge fan. Now, the follow-up was, will there be a sequel to the original miniseries?
It's interesting. It started out that way when when we were doing the DVD finally in 2001 I'd been after Warner's for a long time to do a DVD release, and I was sitting on the dubbing stage, and first of all I said, that's great. What are you going to use for music? What are you going to use for soundtrack? And they said, well, the soundtrack from the original. I said, you mean the soundtrack that was recorded in mono, not stereo? Because Warner Brothers wouldn't give me the money to do a stereo mix, because they said, well, nobody's broadcasting in stereo. And I had I said, no, but in 20 minutes they will be. And so when I did the DVD release, we were able to go back and really, we had to recreate the whole soundtrack. They amazingly came up with a lot of money so that I could afford to do it. And we remastered all the music. I had kept myself personally the audio tapes that we recorded from the recording session with our 95-piece orchestra. And we had to remaster all of the sound effects. And so the sound effects on the DVD and then the later Blu-ray are the way that I always wanted to hear them, and very cool. And it's also, it was released in Letterbox, which they said, well, how do you think it'll look in Letterbox? I said, I think it'll look really good because I shot it in the 1:8:5 aspect ratio, not the 4:3 TV, because I thought it might get a feature release. The Incredible Hulk my pilot got released overseas as a foreign theatrical release back in '78. And I got a call one day from Universal saying, congratulations, you have the top grossing motion picture in Europe. I said, what? He said, yeah, we released your pilot overseas and it's the top grossing movie in Europe. And like for 2-3 months, it was crazy. But when we were doing the DVD for mixing the DVD, we got to the end of the show where we sent out the message into deep space, and Dave West, who was my editor and music mixer, stopped the thing and turned around to me and said, so what happened, Kenny? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, what happened? You sent this message into deep space. Does anybody ever get it? And I thought, gee, that'd be an interesting idea. And I called the guys at NBC, new people there now. Brandon was long since gone from there. And I said, why don't I'd like to do a miniseries called V, the Second Generation that picks up the story 20 years later. And I was not dealing with Brandon Tartikoff. I was dealing with people who had much slower wit than he did. And it took a long time of development to try to get it going. But indeed, I did write a miniseries, which was called V, the Second Generation, of another 4-hour. And by the time it was all done and ready to go, NBC had such terrible experiences with other really bad miniseries that they had decided to stop doing miniseries. So it never got produced. And that has become what is going to be part of hopefully, our V movie trilogy, where the first movie will be a revival of what I had done originally. Of the original 4-hour miniseries, but brought up into the 21st century with a number of changes that would have to be made. But at the same time, it's still true to what I did originally. Even a lot of the dialogue and scenes are the same, because when something's not broke, I don't like to try to go in and fix it, and so it will be a faithful revival of what I did originally. At the same time, when you're doing a revival, usually you just sort of stick to what was written. If you're doing a revival of South Pacific or The Sound of Music or something, but here I'm able to go in and really burnish it and make it better than it was before, as we said on the $6 Million Man. And the 2 sequel movies in the trilogy will be based on what I wrote after we didn't get the miniseries off the ground. I wrote the novel of V, the Second Generation, which got some really lovely reviews, I'm pleased to say. And it's out of print now. Oh, here's a little scoop for you. It is out of print. It's very hard to find except on eBay or some of the secondary places. But I realized that I have a whole stash of the books, of those books, in our library here in my office. And so I'm going to make some of them available to fans who are interested, would like to get an autographed copy. So we'll watch for that on eBay. I'll be announcing it or either on eBay or on Amazon in the near future. So you can have your own, and I'll even put your name on it for you. And the profits will be going to Doctors Without Borders, Amnesty International, which are 2 of the places that I really support. So it'll give everybody a chance to go back in. And if you haven't read it, it's a pretty good book. So that's one scoop, but I have another one that I have to tell you about later on. Okay.
Excellent. I want to go to Mr. Pugster. Still got my email from Kenny back in 2003 when he kindly replied to my email. Super kind and thoughtful chap. Thank you for that, Mr. Pugster. Jerry continued on and said, "Hello, Kenneth. I've
Hello.
been rewatching V. Given how relevant it still is, do you feel do you feel people have forgotten history because as a society we're repeating the same mistakes?" And I have a follow-up to that.
Well, Carlos Santana, I think actually it may be on my Facebook right now. After the election we just finished, I put on my Facebook page Carlos Santana's quote about how those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And here we are. And the word fascist certainly came up a lot in our recent election situation, and it was very disturbing to see the way the country is going. And for the first time, you can really begin to see how it happened in Germany. You know how, as a matter of fact, even in the miniseries, at one point when Mike Donovan he's on the ship, has sneaked into the mothership. And he's walking with Martin, who is a sympathizer, of course, for the resistance. And he's heard about the leader's plans. And Mark asks him, how did somebody like that get to be your leader? And the line I wrote for Martin was something to the effect of charisma, circumstance, timing, and not enough of us stood up and spoke out until it was too late. And here we are.
It is apropos back then as it is now. I have to tell you, Kenny, I've been dying to share this. I did it when we did the review of the series, but it's rare when I'm brought to tears. I cried when the Enterprise was blown up by Kirk. Okay, I was 15 years old, and in the scene in the original miniseries when the Maxwells are being hidden in the boathouse, and the whole thing, Kenny, and I'm getting emotional. I apologize. I know it's a TV show, it's a miniseries, but when he uses the line at the very end with his son, and he says, "If we don't do this, we haven't learned a thing."
We haven't learned a thing. Yeah, and it's true, and it was very true. And it's and a lot of the stories that are in the original V were true stories that I had pieced together. Faye Grant's character was based on a real woman named Andrée de Jong, who was a young woman, a nurse in Belgium and France, and she was thrust into the leadership because she had found a group of British flyers that had been shot down, and she said, "Okay, I'm gonna take you so that you can get back to England." Well, how are you going to do that? Well, we're going to walk over those mountains, the Pyrenees at the south of France. We're going to walk over the Andes and the Pyrenees, and we're going to take you down to Bilbao in Spain, where they can get you out. And when they got there, the people down there said, "How did you do this?" And she said, "We walked. What are you thinking about it?" They said, "Can you bring more?" And she said, "Of course I can." And she went back and made the same trek time after time after time after time, and became one of the great heroes. And she was just a squeak of a girl. And the Nazis even captured her a couple of times. And the first times they let her go because they said, "She's a girl. She couldn't be, head of the resistance." And I love that particularly because I love writing strong women, and particularly strong women who are who don't know they're strong women, but as soon as they are thrust into the task, they rise to the occasion, and that's what I wanted to portray. So there were so many stories in V that came directly from the resistance, and of course I needed a scapegoated community, like the Jews were in World War II, and I realized that the scientists would be the ideal group to be that. So that parallel was going on. But in fashioning V, now the revival, looking toward the movies, I've realized it's too late to use a Holocaust survivor. But gee whiz, it's a timeless story. And I can articulate that by saying that the Bernstein family, the Jewish family from the original, has been transformed into a mixed race family. The wife is white, the father is black. His father, also named Abraham, is black and had lost his wife to the rogue oppressors in apartheid in South Africa. and the story is exactly the same. And yet here it is moved up 2-3 generations, and still as realistic as today as it would have been. And their son, of course, is a mixed race child. But the idea that I could tie it back to the apartheid years, the same way that I was tying the original back to the Holocaust and the nightmares in Europe during World War II, gives it the same historic basis. And I've always sort of felt that V really underneath is Spartacus and the revolt of the slaves. It's about any oppressed group fighting back against the oppressors, including the American Revolution and whatever may be forthcoming, in America now. But let's have some more questions from your friends.
Yeah. Oh, I apologize. Sorry for the feedback. Folks, come on, fire off the questions in the chat room, and we'll get to them. Marcia, did you have anything real quick? Because I also want, you know what? Let me go over the questions. Sonia asked that one, which I think you did answer this one, right? When will the V-Series trilogy be in theaters?
Okay, we're working on getting it made. I have meetings actually tomorrow about it. We have been endeavoring to do it. When it originally came to light that I still owned the motion picture rights, this was a few years ago. Suddenly, I had a lot of new best friends. This happens in Hollywood, and all of the studios wanted to buy it for embarrassingly obscene amounts of money, just for the rights. And I would produce, and probably they'd let me write. But for director, they said they were thinking sort of maybe Michael Bay or somebody like that done a few big movies. And I said, no, I don't want to let go of that. I had seen people try to remake The Bionic Woman and to try to remake The Incredible Hulk as the first two movies that Universal did, which were just disastrous, both artistically and in the box office. And I didn't want to have that happen to V, so I said no. And in Hollywood, of course, when you say no, they come back immediately and they said, "Okay, we understand. How much money do you really want?" And I said, "You guys don't get it. It's not about the money. I never got in this business to make money. I got into this business because I wanted to be a storyteller, and I didn't want to see it get bollocksed." And so I turned all the major studios down, and we begun looking for independent equity financing, which we're still doing, which is not so hard to do when you're doing a movie that's like $15-18 million. But, the revival will be a $60 million movie. And that becomes a tighter pigeonhole that you have to get through. But we're in the process of working at it, and believe me, as soon as we can get it together, it will really be an epic saga that I think everybody is going to enjoy. And we're still struggling with it. And believe me, as soon as I know when it's going to be in theaters, you'll be the first to know.
Everyone needs to go to kennethjohnson.us. That's the website, so you can stay up on all the news. And who knows, maybe we may be able to have him back when he has additional breaking news. But we do have follow-up questions. Marcia, do you have any questions right now? Marcia, you're muted.
I wanted to kind of tag off of what you were talking about as far as the historical use of V and what V meant to families at the time. I had two children. I say had because tragically both of them died suddenly, separately, several years apart.
Oh, Marcia, I'm so sorry.
Thank you. But I remember us watching V together. And that was one of the things that we really enjoyed watching because they would ask questions, because you don't have to be an intellectual you don't have to be an adult to get something out of the miniseries. The questions that young people ask are incredibly poignant and sensitive, and it's to their experience. When we would watch V, and my daughter especially was in grade school, and she was having a problem with one of her teachers who wasn't teaching to her. She was kind of glossing over and going over and not really giving what she could to the children. So we talked about it, and and V came up, and we talked about how you bring somebody to task. You don't let them get away with that. You say, well, you're supposed to teach me. You're the teacher. And so I said, well, we're going to go and talk to her. And so we did, but and so seemingly little things like that, but that helped her in her growth as an adult to see how she could make a difference in her own life.
Right, and it's been wonderful to me, but of all the, I get a lot of emails, obviously, about all of my work. But all of them put together, the Incredible Hulk, Alien Nation, the Bionic shows, other things that I have done, all of the emails I get from all of those shows are eclipsed by what comes in about V. It's just so much bigger. And a lot of them have come over the years from educators, Marcia. They've come from college teachers and from high school teachers, and saying, I use V in my classroom as to be able to talk to people about and teach kids about the dangers of getting misinformation, of the big lies that you can be told. Several of them tell me how they will pair screening V, my original 4 hours, alongside Leni Riefenstahl's 1935 propaganda film about Hitler called Triumph of the Will, which is, if you haven't seen it, you need to find it and look at it because it's terrifyingly engaging. You go to this, you look at the Triumph of the Will and you begin to think, wow, Hitler was a pretty cool guy, really. It's like, I mean, honest to God, and I was raised in a very anti-Semitic, bigoted household, and I would hear these racial slurs all the time about every race and every color and every creed that wasn't just white middle class, And so for some reason, I don't know how, but I'm grateful it didn't stick. It just didn't ever feel right to me. And as I grew older, I realized I needed to try to chip away at that intolerance and as much as I possibly could and hold it up for people to see and say, look at this. You've got to think about this. It's important to know what's going on. And I mean, in the news this morning, there are people marching through Columbus, Ohio with swastikas and Nazi flags. And, it's like, what? Well, it is happening again now, and it has never gone away. And we have to be awake to it, Marcia, like you say. And it's great that you went back to the teachers and said, wait a minute, it's not critical race theory or any of that nonsense. It's the history. It's the truth. And why do you want to shy away from it? Just so that kids today who have not experienced it, who are not part of a minority, we don't want them to feel bad about what, oh, come on, this is history. You've got to see, you don't learn from it. I mean, it was just 2 days ago, there was a picture of Rosa Parks coming up again, walking to high school in 1963 in the middle of the civil rights movement, that little black girl walking in alone amid state troopers so that she can get into the classroom where nobody would sit in the classroom except her and the teacher. And they're important stories, and history has always been really an important subject to me because of the lessons that it teaches if you are willing to listen. Otherwise, as you said, Marcia, we won't have learned a thing. And it's true. It's true.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you quickly about your commentary. We just went through, I watched the whole commentary again. The V with the commentary.
Glutton for punishment.
Your commentary is absolutely fantastic. And I wanted to ask you, how did you do that? You didn't do it all in one take, I imagine.
Yeah, actually we did. But what we did was, we'd stop and go because I'd get tongue-tied and I'd say, let me say that again. I can do that better. And if we weren't live, I would be telling you the same thing. That here, let me answer that question again because I really got too verbose. But no, it was actually the one for my commentary for V was the very first commentary that I'd done, and I looked at a lot of others, and I saw a lot of them were really terrible. Because you'd be watching a movie and you'd hear the director saying, well, now she's walking from the right side to the left side. I said, yeah, duh. But tell me what was going on. How is she feeling? What was going on that day? Why were you? And so I just wanted to make it as detailed as I could, as I did here in some of the others. I remember listening to Ronnie Howard's commentary on Apollo 13, and it was exactly what I was looking to do, which was to assume you've seen the movie already, and now I'm going to tell you what was going on, and what was hard to get, and what was difficult, and what was painful to shoot, and how grievous it was when 3 weeks into filming, one of our leading ladies was murdered, and we had to recast because of the untimely death of Dominique Dunn, who had been in Poltergeist, which is where I had seen her, and asked to have her be with us in V, and it was a nightmarish kind of situation. But I figured if anybody's going to bother to listen, I want to tell them as much as I possibly can. And there's a new DVD out now, actually a new Blu-ray release of my Short Circuit 2, which Sony had put it out a few years ago, but nobody bothered to call me and say, we want to do a commentary? Because I've done commentaries, obviously, on The Incredible Hulk and The Bionic Woman and all the other stuff. And finally, I had a chance to do Short Circuit, and because there were so many great stories about working with a robot, and who was such a wonderful, wonderful, living, breathing character because of the puppeteers that were just magic workers. And so it's just out recently, and I can recommend it to you as a wonderful commentary, because I spent a lot of time, and there were so many stories that I had to tell that I had never been able to tell. So thank you for taking time to listen, and for anybody that wants to listen to my commentaries, I hope you enjoy them. And it also gives you an email, where to write me. And there's an email at my website too, where if you want to write to Kenny, I'm easy to find.
Yes, and I can attest to that I have emailed you and you have emailed me back as well. So I know that's.
I write back. I really try to write back to everybody that takes the time to write me, and certainly a lot of the same questions come up over and over again. And I do have a couple of macros that I can punch in to say, okay, But I always, at the same time, try to respond personally to whatever personal, specific questions people have had, and it's great because it puts me so in touch with the audience. It's a rare thing. One of the things that I love the most about this business is to be able to be with your fans and get their input and their feedback and what plays, and because I was trained in the theater, and one of the frustrations about doing things on television is you can't sit in a group of people. When I was doing my TV shows, the nights that were always the most fun were when we'd have our cast and crew screenings, and all of us that were involved in the movie, plus all of our friends and stuff, then be 1,000 people sitting in the theater watching the TV movie. But it was great because you were among the crowd. I love the theatrical experience of being in a crowd and watching something.
As a matter of fact, JD has this comment. I have very few memories of my father, but I'll always remember watching V with my father when I was only 7. So thank you. Here's a question.
John, that is so sweet. I can't tell you how many people have written to me something almost exactly like that. I was sitting with my mother, my grandmother, my father, and now I'm grown up and I'm looking at it again and going, oh, there was more going on than I realized. But what you do have is those memories of sharing it with someone like that, and having the memory of having done that, and for me to have been peripherally even a part of that is such a rewarding joy. I can't tell you, and thank you for saying that, John.
JD continues. Here's a question: if you could change one thing from V, what would it be?
the visual effects. You know? Oh my
Really?
God. Oh, well, yeah, because, we were working at the state of the art in 1982 when we were shooting it. I mean, I had all the teams for visual effects that Stephen and George had been using in their big movies. And the same makeup and everything. But in those days, the makeup was such a nightmare, and you had to. It was. Nowadays, you can cut Voldemort's nose off, or you can do Pirates of the Caribbean with tentacle faces, and it was so challenging to try to get that going. I remember when we were sitting in the first production meeting, and you're reading through the script with your production team. And so you're facing, well, what are the challenges we're going to see? Let's go through this page by page. And we get to the scene where I wrote, okay, at this point, she picks up this guinea pig and she holds it up and her jaw opens up and then it keeps opening wider until it's distended far beyond human. And then she puts the guinea pig in her mouth and we see it going down her throat, and there was a little laugh among everybody nervously at the production meeting. And Tommy Reba, my special effects guru, said, how are we going to do that, Kenny? And I said, beats the hell out of me, Tommy. I just write this stuff, I said, do you get together with Werner Kepler, who was our award-winning makeup artist, and see what you guys can come up with? And we realized we were going to have to make a full head of Jane's that we could open the mouth, and to the going down the throat. And it was all done in camera in the room when there was no visual effects, no CGI. There was no CGI. There were no C's in those days, and it's true. So they brought Jane in. On the set, okay, and she looked like Jane. And they handed me a little thing that looked like a piccolo. It had little three holes to press. And they said, okay, press the first one and watch what happens to Jane. So I put this, and they got it inside. They had a prosthetic on her neck that I couldn't even see. And when you push this, there was an air bladder right here that filled up. And then there was a second one and a third one. So by holding playing my piccolo, I could make it look like it was going down. And Jane we rehearsed on the stage that day, trying to do it, her swallowing and me trying to get the timing right. And that's how it was done physically. So that would really happen on the stage in the moment. And nowadays, of course, it's easy. CGI, guinea pig swallowing, do that, piece of cake. But back then, it was challenging.
I understand it was a challenge, but for its time, it held up. And George Lucas once said, special effects without a story is a sad thing. And looking back at the story holds up. Now, I am no one to tell you that, Kenny, but it does. It really does. So I understand that you would want to do it all over again. But look, it is a production of its time that still holds its value.
No, listen, it's interesting because we were under such a time crunch to get it done as quickly as possible. I had not one editor, but 4 editors working on it simultaneously. Each of the editors was doing different pieces of the puzzle. Nobody had one whole sequence even. And we were getting, the time was pressing on us, and I was the only one that had seen it all, but I had not seen it all the way through. And so I said, look, guys, let's just tape it together where we are, because Brandon is on my case of when are we going to have this done. I said, just tape it together. We didn't have any of the visual effects. We had done no music or sound effects or even relooped any dialogue that needed to be fixed. And we sat in the screening room 2 up in the front of the Warner Brothers lot. Just me and the 4 editors and the 4 assistants. And we sat there, and bear in mind, no visual effects, no on the screen or anything like that. There'd just be a black slug that said scene missing, or whatever. And we sat there for 3.5 hours watching the whole length of the movie. And when the lights went up, we all were just gobsmacked, my English friends would say. We were stunned, because it was just the actors working, just the story working, and the drama working. and it took your head off, Roger. It was so stunning. We couldn't believe how every performance was spot on, every nuance, every transition, it was really good. And I remember calling Brandon from the screening room and saying, okay, you're going to be really happy. It's really, because I knew that all the rest of the stuff, all of the music and sound effects and special visual effects, particularly, I was just going to be frosting on the cake. We had baked the cake, And I told that to Brandon, and I said, there's only one problem. He said, what's that? And I said, well, you told me that it would be as however long it needed to be. At first, Brandon, when I told him the story, thought it would be 6 hours. I said, I think I can do it in 4. And he said, okay, well, however long it is, that's what it's going to be. I said, okay. So we decided on 4, and that's what we were shooting at. Except it was too long. It was 4 hours and 15 minutes. And Brandon said, well, you can probably trim it down. And I said, Brandon, I'm very good at killing babies in the editing room when I have to, but all of us sitting here cannot see what we could possibly cut out of this that would not hurt the picture. I said, will you come over here and sit and look at it, just you? And he said, yeah, be there tomorrow. And he came over the next day, and we ran it again, because we were 15 minutes over length. With commercials, it would have been 4 hours and 15 minutes. And the lights come up in the screening room, and Brandon's sitting there, and I'm going. He said, "Can we go outside?" "Oh, sure, let's go outside." And so we went outside, and he's still walking around going, He said, "What are you thinking?" And he said, "I'm thinking that I'm going to have to go to all of the 230 affiliate stations and ask them if they will give me 15 more minutes."
Wow.
And I said, "Has anybody ever done that?" And he said, "I don't think so, but let's try." And Brandon did that. He got them all on a big conference call, I guess, in those days, and pitched the situation. And he called me back and he said, "Don't cut a frame." And I didn't. And it's interesting because what you've seen in the original miniseries was my first director's cut. It never changed after that. There were not a lot of nips and tucks and changes. There's no scenes on the floor. And literally every shot that I made is in the movie. I'm very economical as a director. I try not to shoot something. When I've got my eye in the eyepiece saying, okay, what am I going to, is this shot really going to be in the movie? And if I can't justify that, then we don't make the shot. But at any rate, that's the truth. And it was such a profound experience to sit there and just see my actors having nailed it. And we only had 2 quick, fast days of rehearsal before we started. And the whole production was a nightmare. Normally, when you'd have a 4-hour miniseries with 65 speaking roles and visual effects and spaceships and all of that, you'd have about 4 months at least to prep that miniseries before you started shooting. And we didn't have that much time. From the day Brandon read my script and said, go, until the day I said, action, was 2.5 weeks. And people in the industry go, no, that's nuts. No, you can't do that. And I said, we can't, but we did. And we did all the prepping and casting we could in 2.5 weeks, and hadn't even cast Jane Badler's role. And we had to start shooting. And then every Saturday and Sunday, we wouldn't stop working. We'd prep for the following week. So we were doing it literally 1 week at a time as we went along. And it was, I fortunately had my Incredible Hulk crew with me, and so we were all family and spoke the same language and finished each other's sentences. So that was I couldn't have done it without them, but we did it, and it's still to this day, an amazing. When I look back, I don't know quite how we did that.
Wow, that's unreal. Yeah. Jerry says, I've emailed you too, Kenny, a couple of times, and I never took long for you to respond, so thank you.
Oh, Jerry, I'm so glad.
And then Jerry also says, I've commented, I have to commend the casting on your projects. Whether it's Faye Grant or Lindsay Wagner or Bill Bixby, the actors that were chosen were so human and relatable despite all the fantastic stuff. Yes.
Right. Casting, most directors, including myself, will tell you that 90% that 90% of directing is in the casting. If you get the casting right, then you're home free. And it was certainly the case in all of those cases. I had seen in 1973, Bill Bixby did a TV movie, TV play on PBS called Steam Bath. And it was about a group of people that found themselves in a steam bath and suddenly realized there really wasn't an exit. And they couldn't remember how they got there. And there was this little Puerto Rican steam bath attendant who was handing out the towels to them, and they're trying to pick his brain and go, what's going on here? And finally, they come to slowly realize that it's not just a steam bath, they're in purgatory. And he said, Jay, that's right. He said, well, then what are you? What are you, God? And he says, Jace, I'm God. And they go, they're laughing at him. And he says, what, you want to see me get all wrathful and vengeance seeking? And then suddenly you go, holy cow, and they're all well, in this 90-minute performance, I saw Bill Bixby do every single thing an actor could possibly be asked to do and make it work. And when I was writing the pilot for The Incredible Hulk, he was the one I had in my head from the beginning. And he was the only actor I ever sent the script to. And when his agent handed him the script, Bill said, I'm not going to read anything that's called the Hulk. And his agent said, yes, you are. And he did. And he called me the next day and can I come to your office? I said, sure. I'd met him once somewhere just briefly, but we never had involvement. And he came in and said, this is what we're going to do. Is Dr. Renner he's going to suffer? I mean, actors love to suffer, And he said, yeah. I said, yeah. It's a psychological story. It's Greek tragedy, isn't it? The hero brings down the curse upon himself. I said, exactly. That was my Carnegie Mellon theatrical training among the Greeks and the Romans, and so that's where the character that you saw on the screen was Bill Bixby. I mean, Dr. Banner. That's the way Bill was. And when Harv Bennett and I were trying to decide who we were going to hire for the Bionic Woman, we looked at a lot of people. We looked at Sally Field, we looked at Stephanie Powers, a number of other people, wonderful actresses. But Lindsay struck us because not only was she a sort of girl next door pretty, but not beautiful. But for me, as a director, she had a spontaneity. Lindsay could act as though she was making it all up as she went along. And you absolutely felt that to be the case. She had an incredible gift for spontaneity. And Faye, I had worked with on a TV movie called Senior Trip just a year earlier in 1981. And she really stunned me with her abilities. So when I was writing V to begin with, I wrote with Faye in mind to do it. And when I told that to NBC, they said, oh, we really like her. Let's do that. And so that's where it came from. And Mark Singer, I had seen do a performance of Petruchio in Taming of the Shrew in San Francisco in, I don't know, way early on. And I remembered him, and we were trying to find a Mike Donovan, and we just couldn't find the right guy. And I thought, wait a minute, who's that guy? And they brought Mark in on Friday before we started filming on Monday. And he was cast Friday night. We had 2 crazy days of rehearsal, and then, blew right into it there. But so that's the story with the actors, and I have such great respect for the actors. As I said, I went to Carnegie Mellon, the Department of Drama there, which is a theater school. There was no film or television; it was theater, and I just learned all of the Stanislavski. I had all the same training as the director as an actor gets in Stanislavski. And one of the things I always tell my film students is, you want to be a film director, go to acting school, take acting classes, so that you can really understand how to speak to actors. But listen, one thing I want to mention before we lose time. I do have something. It's my other scoop I was going to tell you. I was approached this last year by a company in England called Big Finish. I had never heard of them. They've been around, though, for 20 years. And they produce audio productions of projects, such as things you've heard of, like Doctor Who and Star Trek. And who knew that there was a market, if I didn't, for audio productions of things like that. So we are in the midst of doing a 12-volume audio set that begins that is V. And they convinced me that I could be able to protect the quality of it and involved in all of the scripts and everything. And I've been working with a very talented writer-director, Jonathan Morris, over in England, who is shepherding the stories. And the scripts are coming together quite well. The first box set will be released in January, on the 23rd of January. And it's called, and Big Finish is the company. You can find them. I don't know that it's on their website yet, because I don't know if they've, I don't know if I should even be telling you that the release date is, but the first 3 episodes will be coming out, the first box set of 3 episodes on January. And then the second, the episodes 4, 5, and 6 will be coming out in August of 25, with 6 more after that. And the first bunch, first 6 particularly, are patterned to follow very, very closely what we did in the original miniseries, plus the new treatment of the Jewish family becoming now this mixed race family. And so just check out Big Finish and keep your eye out for that coming out.
Thank you so much. That is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are definitely going to go ahead and check that out. I'm signing up already, because V, the miniseries, with everything. Kenny, I have 2 questions and statements, and then maybe Marcia, if she has anything else. What is the name of the LAPD police officer that was the silent resistance fighter? Because he never turned them in, and he laughs when Ruby takes out the shuttle with the Molotov cocktail, and he does nothing to bring them to.
No, he's wonderful, and I can't pull his name up instantly, but I loved him. I love that character. He got exactly what I was looking for,
Yes.
and he has that moment, a similar moment, a couple of times in the movie. I will email you his name so that you can plug it in.
Oh, okay. Well, I thank you for that. But did the character have a name in the series? Was his name Francois Maquis?
No, well, you see, you're talking to somebody that never saw the series. I never even saw the 6-hour sequel, because Warner Brothers had breached my contract, and I said, sorry, guys. And that's a longer story than we can get into now.
Right.
But basically, it was my choice to leave because of them saying breaching the contract. And I never saw any of or read the sequel the way that it was finally rewritten. I do know that the character of Ham Tyler, for example, just to give you an example of how different theirs was from what we'd written, Ham Tyler was confined to a wheelchair, and it was the essence of his character was his being confined to this wheelchair. He was not an action hero, and because I didn't want him to step on Mark Singer's role, which was the action hero. And then they cast Michael Ironsides. And he went to the producers and said, I can't play a guy in a wheelchair. Ironsides was a big television show, and my name is Ironsides, and I'm in a wheelchair. It's going to be like crazy. And they said, oh, yeah, well, he doesn't need to be in a wheelchair. We'll take him out of the wheelchair. So that totally destroyed the whole essence of the Ham Tyler character. And the other thing that I was channel surfing one day, and I came across one scene. And I said, what is this? It's from V, but it's nothing I shot. Oh, this must be from the sequel. Oh my God. And I watched 30 seconds of it and I turned it off because I watched them make every mistake they could possibly have made in 30 seconds. And I knew I could, because all of my friends who worked on it and had to be involved said, Kenny, don't ever look at it. Don't ever read the script. And I'd done what I was told, and now I saw why. And it was in the original script I said, let's have a priest in this sequel. And what I wanted was Father Karras out of The Exorcist. I wanted a young, scrappy, sexy priest, a street guy who would become a priest, And he's given Diana this Bible. You just read that. You read that, and then we're going to talk, okay? And he comes back and later in a later scene, we see Diana, and she's really like we've never seen her before. She is troubled. She is disturbed. Clearly, stuff is eating at her. And he comes in and says, "So did you read the Bible?" did you read it? And she's going, yes, I did. I did. And I don't like it. And she blows his head off. Boom! And it's that fast. And it's that. Okay, so now I turn this scene on, and I see they've gone to central casting and hired an old Irish guy to play the priest. China, and Jane is right up in the foreground, and the priest is back here, and he's going, did you read your Bible, darling? And she's going, yes, priest, I read your Bible. And so it's all so telegraphed and awful, that I thought, oh my God. That was the only scene I ever saw. And I spoke to Jane about it, and she said, well, that's how they wanted me to do it. And so I said, I know. It's okay.
Yeah, I hear you, and I thank you for that. MDS 114 Scott says, will all of V be released on Blu-ray?
That's up to Warner Brothers. I have no control over it. I don't know. I have no idea. I know that the 6-hour sequel was released by Warner Home Video, not Warner Home Video, Warner Archive, released the 6-hour sequel on Blu-ray. It's on my shelf, but I've never looked at it. And the final bugger is. Sorry, I shouldn't say that, but. Okay. I don't know. Let me say this, MD. If they can get a buck out of it, believe me, they will.
Yeah. Yes. Prior to that, said, hi, Michael from the UK. Love to remember watching it back in 1984 on ITV. I was 13 at the time. He says, I own all of V on DVD. Shame the series was not 16.9. Yeah. So that's just a comment. So I do appreciate that.
Right.
Look, we are already at an hour, and we're already going over. Marcia, did you have a quick comment or question?
Just two little
Please.
things. One is the rap party. Can you tell us? I've heard a little that there was a rap party for V. Can you just a little story, maybe?
Yeah. It was. We were exhausted. Obviously, first off, but it was when you do a show, like any show, you create a family, and you create a family that still many of us are still together to this day. I mean, I still see Mark. I'm still in touch with Jane. I talked to Faye. Faye went on to star on Broadway in Singing in the Rain. It's a quick funny story. She went in to audition for the Debbie Reynolds role, the ingenue, right? And her voice broke when she was singing, and she said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And she started to walk off, and they said, "Wait a minute, would you come back and read for the other role?" The other role being the silent movie star who talked like this, I can't stand him. And that was the role that Faye took, and she stole the show. I was there on opening night on Broadway. And she was was fantastic. So I'm still in touch with with lots of folks and that I have over the years, and so the rap parties are always it's fun to be there, and finally the tension is gone. Jason Bernard, who played the father of Ben and Elias, who was a wonderful actor, but very stormy. He was, we'd do it. He'd do a take, and I'd say, "Jason, can we do it again?" Like, "Well, I did that." Well, I said, "Well, maybe you need to do just a little bit more," And he was grumpy all the way through, but great. I mean, great actor. That scene where he's at the funeral of Ben, and it's still, I use it in my filmmaking class. It's so powerful. But there is somewhere, I think, a video of him grabbing me and dancing with me. He's like, "Hey, I'm sorry I was a jerk sometimes, man, but we had a good movie, and and all like that." And it was that kind of a camaraderie that gets created when you are under the gun, when you have suffered a tragic loss, as we all did with the loss of dear Dominique, and when you've created something that, when we were all in the screening room. I remember when we had the cast and crew screening at the Hitchcock Theater at Universal, and Jeff Sagansky was sitting right behind me, and he kept kicking the back of my chair, kicking it. "Oh, how'd you do that? God, that was so cool! Ah, look at that shot! Oh shit!" He was just really into it, and that kind of friendship that comes together like lightning in a bottle, which is what we really did. That cast was so extraordinary. And Penny Windust, who was playing the mom in the Maxwell Family, she and I became scuba diving buddies after that. So it was relationships like that, and with Michael Durrell also, who's Michael Durrell's real name is Silvestri Stilalo. It was some very, very Italian name, and his agent one time, very early on said, that's not going to fly. How about Michael Durrell? He said, okay. But we had a wonderful time, and as difficult and stressful and as it was when we were filming, we also knew we were onto something that was really strong in terms of its subtext and in terms of its undercurrents and the themes that we were trying to explore. I had the same feeling on Alien Nation, Marcia, when we were doing that. When the show went on the air, I got a wonderful letter from a black doctor in Detroit who said, when I saw this Alien Nation was coming on, he said, really made me angry. He said, why do they want to do another show about stupid aliens? Why don't they do a show about the black experience? And he said, then I saw your show and realized, oh, it was about the black experience. And we'd get the same kind of response from the Hispanic American community, the African, the Asian American community, the LGBTQ community. So many of people who were of a minority that realized it was about them, And that's exactly the story that I wanted to tell. That's what I wanted to chip away at, that intolerance that I heard in my family at the dinner table when I was an only child and had nobody I could really share it with. And I'd hear my parents saying things like, well, it's too bad about the Holocaust, that Hitler didn't have time to finish the job. I mean, things like that just struck me so impactfully when I was a kid, and that I just instinctively knew were not right. And to be able to have the opportunity from all the networks and studios and people like Brandon, who really got it and understood what I was trying to do and the things that I was trying to say, and to give me the opportunity to do that. And now to be able to sit here and feel it coming back through all of the people that we've been talking to on this broadcast, and the people that write me, and so many of them say I was so young when I first saw it, and I was with a family member that reminds me of them, and now when I'm 35, 40, 50 years old, I'm looking at it again and going, oh wow, there was so much more going on than I realized that this was really about. And so I feel really blessed as a writer director to have been able to create stuff that has connected with audiences like that. And I love opportunities like this to be able to thank them to their face and let them know how much I appreciate them.
Kenny, you blow us away. I have a personal comment and I have a request, and we're done. My personal comment is, I saw the color of the program. Everyone that was represented in V, from black to brown to yellow to white, everyone was represented. I got that back then, and it was so beautiful. And
let me just say interrupt for 1 second to say, it was written that way in the script. It says Tony is an Asian American, and whenever I would be talking even to my extras casting people, I'd say, it needs to look like the United Nations, guys, and I want to see people in a wheelchair, and I want to see, all of these things, because that's the real world. And I always was reaching out to real people. I wanted to create characters so that everybody in the audience would have somebody in there they could say, oh, I think I'm like him. Oh, I think I'm like her. Oh, I might be like her, but I wouldn't, and so that they were relatable. And so it's always been important to me before there was such a thing as, DEI hires and that sort of thing. It's the way I've always been, is inclusive. And I remember as a kid I'd go back to visit my grandparents in Arkansas, and I'd be confused because in the bus stations in Washington, D.C., where I grew up, there were only 2 restrooms, men and women. In the South, there were 3 restrooms. And the third was just colored. I didn't get that. I remember going to a water fountain one day in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, where I was born, because over the water fountain it said colored, and I turned it on because I wanted to see what color the water was. Honest to God, true story, And I remember getting on the bus in Arkansas, and I'd run to the back because I loved the big window in the back, and everybody on the bus, black and white alive, would go, and my grandmother would be up front saying, Kenny, you have to come up here. No, I like the back window. I like to see out the big back window. She said, you can't sit back there. Okay, so I came up, and I remember feeling 6 years old that I was being discriminated against because I had to sit in the front, but they got to sit back there. It was like, so all of that stuff has hung with me, and whenever I can, chip away at it. And Alienation was so fun because you could do it right in your face, without offending anybody. And we had such a great time. And I interrupted you. I'm sorry, Roger.
Not at all. No. I thank you for the color, and I thank you for the strong written characters, not only the women, but the men. They were so well written, and it speaks for itself. We have a tiny request. JD, who asked a few questions earlier, now his son, Joker's Vault, says, hello, I've watched V since before I could walk. Since my dad loves the series, I just want to ask, can you call my dad a nerd, please? I
would gladly call your dad a nerd. I have a daughter, Katie, who is a definite nerd. She's 45 years old, and she champions her nerddom, and she's married to one of the world's greatest nerds, and our beloved son-in-law Doug, and that's a wonderful thing for you to be, and for your dad to be, and you should look at him as a role model.
I thank you for that. And the dad right there. Yes, I am, son. Ha. Does Kenneth have plans for appearances in the near future on the East Coast, New York area specifically?
I would love to be back there. I love New York. I lived in New York for many years before I came to California, and many, many dear friends back there too. Occasionally I am back there. Nothing planned specifically at this point, but it would show up on my website or my Facebook page. My Facebook page, incidentally, is Kenneth Johnson Author, AUTHOR. Kenneth Johnson Author. When I first started doing other books, they told me that I had to do that. So you can find stuff there for me too, and check in anytime.
We will. Ladies and gentlemen, we've gone way over. But
Can I just say one thing? We talked about appearances. This past year, sometimes I do panels at San Diego Comic-Con. I was at your panel in 2006, also 2019. And sometimes I produce panels, and we would love to hopefully have a fan panel with you on it. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to pitch a panel for San Diego Comic-Con and ask you, hopefully, maybe that you can be with us fans, and just we'll listen to your stories and answer questions and things like that.
Absolutely not. What are you thinking? Of course I will. Listen, I'm really going to talk to Roger, and I'm happy to talk to you.
Thank you.
I'll take that.
That's really absolutely, Marcia. Just how to get in touch with me and do it, and we'll do it. And Roger, of course, I'm kidding. And this has been a delightful interview, and I have been so pleased to be able to see you guys face to face, and also to be in touch with the fans who just really mean so much to me, because without them, I wouldn't have an audience, and I love them.
We love you so many.
We do, and we're going to leave it at this. You mean so much to us, and what you've given to us, and you are so kind in being with us today, and we've gone over. You are so gracious, and we cannot wait to see your further endeavors. Yes. And I'm going to be checking out the books as well, which oops, I messed up. So I'm going to be ordering some books myself, because I love what you've done. I am a fan, and I thank you. And on behalf of everyone in the chat room, we thank you for how you affected us, how you changed our lives, and how you opened our eyes to what is, what could be, and even what was. Ken, you are beyond oh my goodness, what do they say? Oh my God! You are that famous guy from Italy. Yeah,
Sorry,
okay.
sorry. No,
Yeah, that
no.
guy. Oh,
No, no.
Renaissance
Oh,
man.
don't stop. Renaissance, man. Oh,
There it is. Yes.
Leonardo. There you go. Right. Yeah.
When it comes to storytelling, wow, Kenny, we are privileged, and I
Oh,
thank
wow.
you.
Thank you.
You've entertained, you've caused tears, and you've made heroes by your stories, and I thank you, Kenneth. It's
Thank
been
you.
it's a privilege,
Thank you
and
so much.
on behalf of everyone, can't wait to see you. Can't wait to meet you in person. And if we make Comic-Con, dude, that's gonna sell out. So we look forward to that. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to call it. We're way over. And thank you all for all your comments in the chat room. Hopefully, we got to all of them. Other than that, folks, as it's said once again, we did this in honor of this because he did it then. Would you read your words to us? And we'll end on that.
Uh-huh. Well, when I was writing it, I realized I didn't want to just start cold, and I wanted to set the tone. And that's why I wrote this little phrase, and it's on the front of every script that goes out about the new versions too, to the heroism of the resistance fighters, past, present, and future. This work is respectfully dedicated.